Masechet Avoda Zara, Daf Nun Chet. We begin with a story. Hahu Avoda Dava b'Mechoza, Ata Goy Ayal Chanutad Yisrael. There was a certain incident that happened in the city of Mechoza. That's where Rava lived. He was the rabbi there. And a certain non-Jew came to the store of a Jew. And the non-Jew asked the storekeeper, "Do you have any wine to sell?" And in fact, the storekeeper did have wine, but for some reason, he did not want to sell it to this non-Jew. So he said, "No, no, we have none." Now there was, in fact, a bucket full of wine there in the store, and the non-Jew noticed it. Shadi be yede sichsech be amar lehu hai lav hamrahu, and so the non-Jew stuck his hand into that bucket and stirred the wine around and saw that it was wine, and he asked the storekeeper, "Isn't this wine?" So now the non-Jew caught the Jew in his lie. And the Jewish storekeeper was angry, and he took the bucket, and in his anger, he threw the contents of that bucket into a larger barrel of wine. Now, he did this in anger, so this was not fully thought through and not a very smart thing to do. Because the problem is that the non-Jew, by touching the wine, perhaps made it yayin nesech. That's the question that we're going to be dealing with. He touched it not in order. He didn't have intention to make it yayin nesech. His intention was to check what it is, to see what's inside. But perhaps that would make it prohibited, perhaps not. In any case, the storekeeper, by taking this bucket and throwing it into the larger barrel, maybe the bucket has just 1 gallon of wine, and the barrel has 9 gallons of wine, and now he's going to perhaps make the entire contents of the barrel prohibited too. He did it in his anger to say, like, "I'm not selling this to you, forget this," and he threw it into there, like, this is off limits, but not a very smart thing to do. In any case, afterwards, the question came to Rava. And Rava says, you can sell the contents of the entire barrel to non-Jews. What he means by that is that it's prohibited to drink, for a Jew to drink by itself, because now, by stirring it, although he did not have intention, still it makes it prohibited to drink, and the mixture also into the big barrel with the permitted contents. Now that it got mixed, so the barrel is prohibited to drink, but you can get benefit from it, and so yes, you can sell it to a non-Jew. In fact, he'll have to sell it to a non-Jew now. So in his anger of not wanting to sell anything at all to the non-Jew, now he has to sell all of the barrel to the non-Jew. That was Rava's Pesach Halacha. Ifliga le Rav Huna bar Chinena v'Rav Huna bered Rav Nachman. However, these two Rav Hunas, one the son of Chinena, the other the son of Rav Nachman, heard about the case, and they prohibited it. It seems that they were in a different city, but they, either this case or a similar case like this, they said is prohibited. Nafkishi pured Rava v'sharu, nafkishi pured Rav Huna bar Chinena v'Rav Huna bar Rav Nachman ve'asri. And a shofar was blown in from the courthouse of Rava. Whenever there was a new pronouncement, they would blow a shofar to announce, "Hey, everybody listen, there's a ruling," or something happened. And so they blew a shofar and from the betin of Rava and said, this wine is permitted. And around the same time, there was also a shofar blown, an announcement made by the two Rav Hunas that such a case, it is prohibited. So number one, you have to assume that prohibited even for sale. So you have to assume that the non-Jew who touched it, even though it was not for intention for yain nesech, but just to see what was in it, makes it prohibited for sale. And furthermore, that even the mixture, now that it got mixed with the rest, also the whole thing becomes prohibited for sale. So they're very stringent. Ikla Rav Huna bered Rav Nachman lemechoza. Now, at some time afterwards, Rav Huna was one of the Rav Hunas above, the son of Rav Nachman. He traveled from wherever he had been to Mechoza, where Rava lived. Amar le Rava le Rav Eliakim shema'eh, terok gale, tela netui nashe denitrid. This is a great story. And so, Rava must have heard that Rav Huna bered Rav Nachman is coming to Mechoza, so he told his attendant, whose name was Rav Eliakim, close the gates so that no one will come in and disturb us. Well, I guess he apparently knew, well, there was a shofar blown, so it was a public announcement. So he knew that Avoda, the son of Nachman, is coming, who disagrees with him, and Rava didn't want to deal with it. So he said, close the gates. But it was too late, it didn't work. Rav Huna came into Rava's office, or Bet Midrash, Amale Kihai Gavna Mai, and he says, Rava, you're the Marad Atra here. I have a question for you. If a non-Jew would touch wine in such a way without intention, what would be the law? And it got mixed up in other wine. What do you think? What would be the law? Amale Asur Afilu Ba'na'a. And Rava changed his tune. He says, no, it's prohibited, not only to drink, prohibited even to get benefit from it. So apparently, Rava in the meantime had thought about it and changed his mind. Either he changed his mind or he was embarrassed in front of Rav Huna to disagree with him. We're going to see in a minute that actually he did change his mind because of some challenges that Abaye confronted him with. So this time he said, no, it's prohibited. Rav Huna challenges Rava and says, Master, you're telling me now that it's prohibited, but didn't you say earlier that if a non-Jew stirs wine, then it does not become yain nesech? You wrote earlier that it's permitted. Now you're saying it's prohibited. You're contradicting yourself. What's going on? And Rava answers and says, when I said that it was not yain nesech, I meant that it was the money besides that wine that was poured in. In other words, if you have the bucket that has 1 gallon of it, that gallon is prohibited. It gets mixed up into 9 gallons of wine that was permitted. So now, when I said you can sell the whole barrel, I meant, you can sell the whole barrel, but you cannot get benefit from the money from that 1 gallon that was poured in. So after you sell it, you have to take whatever you got, $100 of profit, and so you have to take, since it's 1 out of 10 is prohibited, take $10 and throw it into the Dead Sea. Can't get benefit from that. Did I say that even that wine that was in the bucket that the non-Jew touched would be permitted? No, I never meant to say that. Now, it seems from what we learned, what we read before, that Rava's original intention was in fact to permit the whole thing. He says, yes, you can sell it. He should have clarified if he meant you can sell 9/10 of it, but you can't benefit from 1/10 of it. But now he's reinterpreting, it seems, what he had said before, because he's embarrassed. He doesn't want to admit to Rav Huna that he was wrong. He says, no, this is what I meant the whole time. Now I agree with you. Amar Rava, ki atai lepumpedita afkan nachmani shematata umatnita de'asir. And now Rava explains why he had changed his mind. It's because he came to a pumpedita where Abaye was the Marad Atra. Abaye's name was also Nachmani. Why do you have 2 names? There are various theories. One of the theories is that the word Abaye in Aramaic means comfort. So Nachman, Nechama, also means comfort. So it's just a translation of the Hebrew name to Aramaic, or vice versa. So we had both of these names. And so Rava says, when I came to Pumpedita, Abaye, Nachmani, brought Amoraic statements and Tannaitic statements to prove that such a case is prohibited. And I had to give in because he overpowered me with all of these proofs. So number one, from Amoraic stories, there was a case just like this one where a non-Jew touched wine, but without intention to make yayin nesech, just to measure it or to see what it was. And it happened in Nehar De'ah. That's where Shemuel was the rabbi. And Shemuel said, prohibited, even from getting benefit. A similar case happened in Tiberias, where the Yochanan was the rabbi, and he also prohibited to get benefit from it. Now, Rava says, I tried to defend my position, and I said, you know why Shemuel and the Yochanan in their cities prohibited it? Because the people there are not Bnei Torah, they're ignoramuses. And if the rabbi would say, it's permitted, they would not know how to distinguish between one case and the other, and know that, this case is permitted to sell because he only mixed it with intention to see what it was. But if in a different case where he poured it with and maybe he had intention therefore for yayin nesech, so then they would get confused and think, oh well, the rabbi permitted it in the other case, so maybe this permitted in this case also. And they're not knowledgeable enough to know that what the cases are different. Without intention, it's permitted to get benefit, but with intention, then it's prohibited. So that's why they said it's prohibited in those cases, but really they would agree with me that it's permitted. And Abaye countered that and said, oh, so you're telling me that Tiberias and Nahar De'ah, the people, the Jews there, are not learned in Torah, and the people in Mechoza are learned in Torah? The people in Mechoza were not so learned in Torah either. Mechoza, in fact, was a suburb of the capital of the Sasanian Persian Empire, the capital of Ctesiphon. Mechoza was a suburb of that, and in fact, Mechoza was known to be a cosmopolitan city, a city that was, people were well-to-do and somewhat, probably more assimilated, and therefore less B'nai Torah, likely less B'nai Torah than the other places. So he's kind of making fun of, oh, in your place, Rava, everybody is learning in Torah, and they're going to know. So in other words, even according to your argument, Rava, that, oh, they were only being stringent because the people didn't know, so in your place also that will still apply. And even if you think that me'ikad hadin, it's permitted, you should rule that it's prohibited for a person who's not knowledgeable. Matnita de agardamim goy shekadach bemeneket vehe'ala o shetaminakos vechizor lechabit ze yamase va'asaruhu. And I will bring a Tanaitic source, a baraita, about this market inspector. This is a Greek word. Agodonomos is a person who's in charge of the marketplace and fixing prices, make sure people aren't overcharging their customers. So he was a non-Jew, and he went and drilled a hole in a barrel and put a tube in it to bring out some wine to taste it, to see, let's see the quality of this wine, and if the price that you set is okay. Or either that, or he had poured some wine into a cup, and then he returned the leftover wine, he put it back into the barrel. And so in both of these cases, he touched the wine, and now his intention was to test it, to see if what's the quality of this wine. His intention was not to make a libation. It's his professional job to be the taste tester. But in both cases, he touched the wine either with the tube or with the wine that he drank and then threw the rest back into the barrel. So it's just like the cases above. And this was an actual case, and the rabbi said it's prohibited, and prohibited meaning from getting benefit. So you see, Abaye proves to Rava from a baraita that such a case is prohibited. And then Rava will ask, "My lav behana'a la bishtiya." Abaye said, "Isn't it true that when it says asur, that means also prohibited to get benefit from it?" But Rava said, no, not necessarily. Maybe in that case they only prohibited it to drink, which I admitted that you can't drink it, but maybe you can sell it. So I can be reconciled with this baraita. But Abaye says, no, if it was permitted to get benefit from it, then the baraita should have said it can be sold. But it doesn't say yimacher, it says asaruhu, they made it prohibited. And that clearly means prohibited across the board, even for selling. Kedekatani sefa, because you can see from the continuation of that baraita and the terminology that it uses. Because there it says, haram goy, shehoshit yado lechavit, uchsavur shel shemen hi, v'nimset shel yayin. If a Gentile confiscator, someone that would go and just take things, he stuck his hand into a barrel thinking that it was oil, and he wanted to take some of the oil in his hand. But it turns out it was wine. So obviously he didn't have intention to make this yayin nezech, because in fact he didn't know it was wine, he thought it was oil. So here, what do we do with this now that he put his hand in it, in the barrel of wine? This in fact was a case, there was a case like this, and the rabbi said, let it be sold. In other words, said you can't drink it anymore, but it can be sold. That's the continuation of the baraita. So clearly, when the baraita wants to say that you can sell it. It says the word yimacher, but it doesn't say yimacher in the Resha. It says asaru. So asaru has to mean that it's prohibited totally, even to get benefit from it. Tiyubta de Rava tiyubta, and that is a final refutation of Rava. And so after that discussion that Rava had with Abaye, and he was refuted, and he says, okay, you're right, I changed my mind, and that explains why when Rav Huna came and said, Rabbi, what do you think? You said it was prohibited before. So in fact, he changed his mind. He didn't want to admit to him, for whatever reason, that he had changed his mind, so he simply reinterpreted the Pesach Halacha that he had given in the first place. Rabbi Yochanan ben Arza v'Rabbi Yosef ben Nehorai havu yatvu v'kash shatu chamra. One time, these two sages, Rabbi Yochanan ben Arza and Rabbi Yosef ben Nehorai, were sitting and drinking wine together. Atahu gavra, a certain man came. Amrule ta ashkinan. And so the rabbis told this man, please come and serve us drinks. They didn't know exactly who he was, but he was there, he was available, and he was happy to serve them. Lebatar dirma lechasa igalai milta de goyhu. After he poured their wine into the cup and served them, then they realized that this person was not Jewish. So now what are they going to do with this wine that they were served? Is it permitted or not? And they took two totally opposing positions. One of these sages, doesn't say which one is which, said is that the wine is prohibited even to get benefit from. They can't even sell it. That's it. You got to just throw it out. And the other sage said it's permitted even to drink. Amar Rabbi Yosha ben Levi, Manda Asar Shapir Asar, Umanda Shareh Shapir Shareh. Rabbi Yosha ben Levi, reflecting on the story, said that the sage who said is prohibited had what to rely on, and the one who said is permitted also had reasoning to rely on. What is the reasoning each way? Manda asar memad amar sakada ted rabanan ki hane shikhra kashatu elavadai hai hamrahu venaske. The one who said that it's prohibited. So let's analyze the mindset of the non-Jew. The non-Jew, seeing these two very important sages sitting and drinking together, was thinking to himself, these great sages, would they drink shikhra? Shikhra is liquor made out of fruits, but that was much less important, much less expensive than wine. So he's thinking to himself, these are two distinguished sages. Surely they would not be drinking just juice, liquor, rather must be that they're drinking wine. And so he realized that they in fact were drinking wine, and so we can presume that this non-Jew idolater would pour it, and while he was pouring it, he would have in mind that this would be a libation to idolatry, and therefore it's totally prohibited. Man deshareh shapir shareh, me'mar amar sakad atech rabanan ki haneh chamra kashatu ve'amru le'ledidi ta ashkinan ela vaday shichrahu de kashatu ve'lan naskeh. The opinion that said that the wine is totally permitted even to drink, they would psychoanalyze this non-Jewish waiter and say he must be seeing these two distinguished sages and thinking, can it be that they're drinking wine and that they would tell me, come and pour wine for us? They would know. He's assuming that they know that he's not Jewish. And he knows that the Jewish law would prohibit this non-Jewish waiter from pouring. So surely if the rabbis asked him to pour this drink for them, then it must be that it's not wine, otherwise they wouldn't allow him to pour it. Rather, he comes to the conclusion that it must be that this is fruit liquor that they are drinking. And since it's just fruit liquor, so he is not going to pour it as a libation to his god, because even the idolaters only pour wine to their gods and not other liquors. And therefore, when he pours it, he does not have in mind that it's for idolatry. Since he doesn't have in mind, therefore it's totally permitted. Now we ask, wait, can't this waiter, non-Jewish waiter, just look at it? Why is he making this three-step reasoning? Oh, the rabbis are distinguished, and therefore it must be that they would drink wine, or that they would not be drinking wine. Why is he using his logic for this? Why not just look at the liquid and see if what it is? And the answer is Belalia. Oh, it's at night. There's no light, so that's why he didn't know. Well, can he smell it? Liquor smells different from wine. Bechadatas, new wine that still doesn't have a strong smell, so he couldn't smell it. Okay, now even according to the opinion that says that he had in mind that this is fruit liquor and not wine at all. And so certainly he didn't have in mind that he's going to pour it as yayin esech, but still, isn't he touching it with a ladle? And we saw earlier that if a non-Jew touches either directly with his finger or touches with a stick or a straw or lulav, even touching it unintentionally still would make it prohibited to drink, at least. And so, if a non-Jew touches a liquid, even without intention, even not even knowing that it's wine, thinking that it's something else, still it should be prohibited, at least to drink. No, he didn't use a ladle. He didn't stick a ladle into it and thereby touch it even indirectly, but rather he poured it. He took the barrel of wine and he tilted it over and poured it. So he was not touching it, not even indirectly. Now, this is called kocho. The wine is moving because of his force. But when you combine those together, only moving it by his force, and it's without intention because he thought it wasn't wine. If you have both of those factors, then the rabbis did not make any gezerah at all, and that's why, according to that opinion, it was permitted to drink. Rabbi Aseh asked Rabbi Yochanan, wine that was diluted by a non-Jew, is that permitted or not? You have wine there, and they used to drink wine regularly, and they would dilute it with water. So he's pouring water into the wine. He's not necessarily even lifting or touching the wine, but he's only pouring water into it. What about that? Is that permitted or not? Before Rabbi Yochanan answers the question, he has a challenge about the language that Rabbi Aseh used. Rabbi Aseh, why did you use this unusual verb, misacho? Why not say mizago? That's how we always talk about it. Mazag lo kos means to mix a cup. Amar le ana kedichtib kamina tabcha tibcha mascha yena. Rabbi Aseh says, I was using the language that's in a pasuk in Mishleh. It's talking about a woman. She has prepared her meat. She has mixed her wine. So mixing wine, it says mascha. I wanted to use the word that's in the Tanakh. Amar le lashon Torah la'atzma, lashon chachamim la'atzmo. Rabbi Yochanan makes a very important observation that even though Hebrew language is Hebrew language, there's different dialects and there's different time periods, versions of Hebrew, and the language of the Torah, he means Tanakh here, it's in Mishleh, is separate from from Rabbinic Hebrew. There's Biblical Hebrew and Rabbinic Hebrew. If you learn grammar, you have to know which Hebrew are you doing. There's Biblical dictionaries and there's Rabbinic Hebrew dictionaries, and the grammar is not the same, the vocabulary is not the same. And so Rabbi Yochanan is saying, listen, if you're speaking in times of Tanakh, okay, then if you're learning Tanakh, then it makes sense to be following biblical Hebrew, but you're not. We're rabbis here. We're speaking rabbinic Hebrew, so use the usual term, and so don't say mesacho. You should say mizago. All right, mai. In any case, what's the answer? Amale asur mishum lech lecha amrin nezira sechor lecharma la tikra. And Rabbi Yochanan answered, it is prohibited. Technically, you're right. It should be permitted because he's not touching the wine. He's just pouring the water into the wine. However, we have a principle that we go a step further and tells people to stay away from anything prohibited. And the example that we quote is a nazir. We tell a nazir is not permitted to drink wine or anything from grapes. So technically, is he allowed to go into a vineyard? Yeah, he could walk around in a vineyard, but we tell him not advisable. We tell a Nazir, go around, go, we say to Nazir, go away from these grapes. If he's near a vineyard, go around. We don't come near the vineyard, because if you're near it, then it's likely that you're going to, just by mistake, this looks like a nice grape, and you'll eat it. The other day on Tisha B'Av, we had a Brit Milah, and so we were there, we were saying the Barachot, and we're holding the cup of wine, because we're saying the Barachot, naming the baby. So the Mohel reminded us, don't drink, because when you have it there, okay, and you're thirsty, so you might forget it's a happy occasion on Tisha B'Av, so you might just not realize that it's Tisha B'Av and drink, so we kept reminding everybody who had the wine, don't drink. Okay, so we tell them to stay away. So too, even though technically this non-Jew did not touch the wine, nevertheless we say, he mixed water in it. You know what? Stay away. Do not drink it. Rabbi Yirmiyah ikla le sabta. Chazach amra de mazge goy veishte Yisrael mine va'asar lehu mishum lech amrina nezira sechor lecharma la tikrab. And another example of this, Rabbi Yirmiyah came to a place called Safta, and he saw wine that a non-Jew diluted with water, and he saw a Jew drank from it. So the Yirmiyah went and corrected him, and he said, no, don't do that. It's prohibited because of the same phrase. We tell a Nazir, go away. We tell him, you see this vineyard? Go around it, don't come near it. Itmar nameh, amar Rabbi Yochanan v'amri la, amar Rabbi Aseh, amar Rabbi Yochanan. Yain shemizego goy, asur mishum, lech, amrina nazira, sechor lecharma, la tikrab. And there's yet another statement of Rabbi Yochanan, and others say it's Rabbi Aseh, in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, that if a non-Jew mixed water into the wine, it's prohibited because we tell the Nazir, go around, do not come near to the vineyard. And now another story about a traveling rabbi. Resh Lakish ikla le Bosra. Chaza Yisrael de ka'achli pere de la me'aseri ve'asar lehu. Resh Lakish went to a city called Bosra. It's on the, Resh Lakish is from Eretz Yisrael, but he crossed the Jordan and he went to this city over here called Bosra. Now there is another city, as we're about to see in a minute, called Beser. Beser is mentioned in Sefer Devarim chapter 4 when it says, Az yadil Moshe separated cities on the other side of the Jordan, and so this city Besed is in the territory of Reuven. And so therefore, the territory of Reuven is incorporated within Eretz Yisrael, has Kiddushat Eretz Yisrael, and anything that grows there, you have to take Ma'aser. Now, Resh Lakish did not go to Besed, but to Bosra. And he thought that Bosra is the same as Besed. He thought he was in Besed. And so he saw some Jews that were eating produce without taking ma'aser. And he told them, hey, that's not allowed. You're in a place in the tribe of Reuven. And so you can't do that. And then he saw water that idolaters bow down to that water. And then the Jews drank from it. He said, you're not allowed. If a non-Jew worships something, then it makes it prohibited, and the Jew cannot benefit from it. So two different laws. Then the Shakish went back home, and he saw his teacher, colleague, Rabbi Yochanan, and told him all about the story. Rabbi Yochanan says, while your coat is still on you, go back. In other words, go back immediately and correct these two opinions, because they are not correct. Beser lav hainu bosra umayim shel rabim and ne'esarin. Right? Don't even rest over here. Rather, keep your coat on. Go back and tell them that it's permitted. Why? Because Beser is not the same as Bosra. You thought you went to Beser and you saw them eating without taking Maaser. Because in Beser, you're right, you have to take Maaser. But that Bosra is not the same as Beser. It's a different city completely. Bosra is not in Eretz Yisrael, is not Kadosh, and therefore they are permitted to eat produce without Maaser. And furthermore, there's another rule that water that belongs to the public does not become prohibited. That's the general rule, that even if someone worships something, one can only make something prohibited if he himself owns it. You can't go to someone else's house and bow down to it and make his house prohibited, nor can you make something that belongs to the public, like a public water source. So that is permitted even if people are worshipping it. And therefore go back and tell them that these two things are permitted. Rabbi Yochanan netameh. Rabbi Yochanan is consistent with what he says elsewhere. Damar Rabbi Yochanan mishum Rabbi Shimon ben Yehosadak. Ma'im shel rabim en nesarin. He says in the name of Rabbi Shimon ben Yehosadak that water that belongs to the public cannot become prohibited even if lots of people are worshipping that water. Now we can infer from this statement that he says Ma'im shel rabim that it's only because it belongs to the public. But what if it's privately owned? Well then, yes, someone who worships his own privately owned water, then we'll make it prohibited. But why should that be? Why doesn't Rabbi Yochanan say that also is permitted? Because it's attached to the ground. And that's the general rule. Anything that is part of the ground, like a mountain, the ground itself, even if someone worships it, is permitted. And so therefore, if someone has a lake, in his on his own property, and he owns that lake and he worships it, still it should be permitted because it's part of the ground. It's attached to the ground. La siricha de talshinu gala. No, we're talking about a case where a wave raised the water and detached it from the ground. So this guy maybe has a privately owned area of the beach, and there's waves, and a big wave comes and jumps up into the air, and at that moment it's not attached to the ground, and he goes and bows down to it. So that's the case where he would say that since it's privately owned and also not attached to the ground, it becomes prohibited. Sof sof abnei har sheni daldeluninu tistayem Rabbi Yochanan damar asurot. Well, even if that's the case, that this is something that was attached to the ground, that was separated by natural causes, that would be the same as a boulder of a mountain that became dislodged. And this was the subject of a machloket a few dapim ago on daf 46, in which Rabbi Yochanan and the sons of Rabbi Chia disagreed. And we didn't know which side said which. One said it's permitted, one said not permitted. So if you're going to say that this statement of Rabbi Yochanan is involving water that was dislodged naturally by a wave and is prohibited, so then that would be the same law as a boulder that naturally dislodges from a mountain, and the Rabbi Yochanan then would be the one that says prohibited. Look, right, we can solve our problem. But back then when we discussed it, we didn't bring this as a source to say, oh, Rabbi Yochanan must be the one that says prohibited, and so we explain why. La siricha de tafchinhu bideh. No, we're talking about a case where someone struck the water with his hand. So you take your hand or a stick and you bang the water, and then some droplets fly out, and while they're flying out, the idolater worships them. That's what it's talking about. That would be the same as a boulder that someone quarries, chisels out, which certainly would be prohibited. That's no longer attached to the ground, and it's not detached by natural forces, but rather by human forces. That's the case where Rabbi Yochanan would say that as if it belongs to a private individual and it was detached by human force, then it becomes prohibited. Baruch Adonai Le'olam. Amen ve'amen.